Marvel, the comic book publishing company that went from being on the verge of bankruptcy to being that thing Martin Scorsese hates for being too gosh dang popular. Marvel, and more specifically Marvel Studios, has been pumping out blockbuster after blockbuster since 2008, and with their 23 currently released films alongside the countless other TV shows and movies currently in development, it can be a little hard to follow the overarching story of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is. But thankfully for you, there's people like me who follow every godforsaken detail in these films that can tell you the overarching story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So today on the first ever episode of Plot Dump, we're going to be recapping the overall story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But first, some ground rules. We're only going to be covering the movies up to the release of Spider-Man Far From Home, aka the Infinity Saga. Also, we won't be talking about any of the TV shows Marvel's released over the years, mostly because they have very little bearing on the actual plot. Though you should still watch Daredevil. Lastly, since there's 22 films we're going to be looking at today, we gotta go super duper fast. Alright, let's get started. This is the story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, but before we actually start, I gotta explain one more thing. When the universe was created, there were 6 singularities that exploded into existence that over time formed into 6 stones of unbelievable power. They represent the mind, the soul, space, time, reality, and power. So try to keep those in mind as we go along. Anyway, let's start out with Iron Man. Genius billionaire playboy philanthropist Tony Stark is loving life, running his father's company, selling weapons of mass destruction, when one day he's captured by terrorists in Afghanistan. During his kidnapping, one of Tony's missiles causes shrapnel to enter his heart, nearly killing him until a man named Yinsen saves him by making a magnet in his chest. The terrorists demand Stark and Yinsen to make a missile for them, but they totally don't do that, instead make a high-powered suit of armor instead, fueled by a little small generator called an arc reactor that Tony replaces the magnet with. So Tony uses the armor to escape from the terrorists, Yinsen dies in the process, and eventually Tony is rescued by his best friend Rhodey in the military and taken back to America. Tony eventually decides to perfect and enhance his suit of armor, eventually becoming the Iron Man. He also builds an AI butler named Jarvis to help him run the suit. Tony decides to use the suit to fight the terrorists that still have his weapons, and eventually learns that his business partner Obadiah Stane was the one who originally kidnapped him and has been selling his weapons to terrorists. Stane builds his own Iron Man armor, and the two duke it out, ending with Tony doing the heroic action of killing him. The movie ends with Tony getting together with his secretary Pepper Potts, him telling the world that he's actually Iron Man. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury breaks into his house and tells him about the Avengers Initiative. And after this, Rhodey goes from looking like Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle. Okay, moving on. The Incredible Hulk. I don't have a Blu-ray for this one. Bruce Banner is a college kid that one day decides to recreate a super soldier serum, which might be important later, I don't know. But the process goes horribly wrong, and now every time he gets angry, he turns into a big green rage monster called the Hulk. The military, more specifically a guy called General Ross and Emil Blonsky, decide they want to capture the Hulk to use him as a weapon, causing Bruce to go into hiding for the next several years. About 5 years pass and the military realize that Bruce has been hiding in Rio after a drop of his blood falls into a soda bottle, accidentally killing Stan Lee in the process. Bruce returns to his old college university to try to cure himself of being the Hulk, where he's forced to fight Blonsky, who has been souped up with some super juice, I guess. It's probably just monster energy. Blonsky still loses though because he's super lame, causing him to inject himself with some of Bruce's blood, becoming the Abomination in the process. They punch for a bit with the Hulk winning, causing himself to go back into hiding so he can better control his rage. In the post-credits, Tony meets with General Ross to tell him about their super duper cool team that they're making, and in between movies, Bruce goes from looking like Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo. Okay, moving on. Iron Man 2. Not much happens here. Tony Stark continues to be Iron Man, but is slowly dying due to the arc reactor in his chest slowly poisoning him. This Russian guy with electric lips fights him because his dad screwed him over several years ago. Rhodey takes one of Tony's suits and weaponizes it, becoming the War Machine in the process. A super spy named Black Widow is introduced. This guy called Justin Hammer dances for a bit. Tony creates a new element by finding his dad's Disneyland plans and fixes his arc reactor poisoning in the process. And eventually the Russian guy is killed by the
real superpower of teamwork.
And that's about it. Next, Thor. So Thor's a Norse god from the planet/realm called Asgard. He has the power of thunder, lightning, and he has a magical hammer named Mjolnir that he can call to his side at will. One day his jerk dad decides to banish him to Earth, taking away his power and his hammer in the process. He did this so Thor could learn a lesson in humility, because prior to this he tried to wage war on an entire race of species called frost giants. On Earth he meets a couple of scientists named Jane Foster, Eric Selvig, and Darcy Lewis. He eventually becomes a better person and gets his hammer back. He makes out with Jane Foster for a bit. And eventually he goes back to Asgard to stop his evil adopted brother Loki, who maybe dies at the end? I don't know. And that's basically Thor. But in the post-credits scene, Dr. Eric Selvig meets up with Nick Fury, who shows him this blue cube-shaped object that might be important for later. Captain America. So way back in 1943, this kid named Steve Rogers wants to join the military and help his country, but he keeps getting rejected because he's a little tiny baby man who would probably die instantly in war. Eventually, though, the scientist named Erskine sees the potential Steve Rogers has and recruits him for a super soldier project. Also, yeah, it's the same super soldier serum that turned the Bruce into the Hulk. Luckily for Steve, though, the experiment actually works and makes him super buff and strong, but Erskine is killed shortly after. After going against Tommy Lee Jones' orders and saving a bunch of troops behind enemy lines, including Steve's childhood best friend named Bucky Barnes, Steve is officially recruited to join the main lines of the army and officially becomes Captain America. After that, he receives a fancy vibranium shield made by Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark. He gets closer with a CIA agent named Peggy Carter, watches his friend Bucky fall off a train, and fights a secret Nazi organization named Hydra, led by this guy, Red Skull. Red Skull have been using that cube-shaped object known as the Tesseract to create laser weapons for the Nazis. However, and nobody knows this yet, it's actually one of the 6 Infinity Stones, aka the Space Stone. Anyway, eventually Steve and Red Skull are fighting on a plane loaded with bombs when Red Skull decides to grab the Infinity Stone like a freaking doofus and consequently gets thrown across space. With little time remaining, Steve decides to crash the plane into the Arctic, seeing it as the only way to save America. Miraculously, however, Steve survives the crash and wakes up in modern-day New York, not unlike my favorite movie, The Smurfs, where he meets up with Nick Fury, who tells him that he's been asleep for over 70 years. Also, at some point, Howard Stark found the Tesseract at the bottom of the ocean and gives it to the organization that will one day be known as S.H.I.E.L.D., which is the same organization that Nick Fury runs. The Avengers. So, JK, Loki's still alive, and he's teamed up with an alien called the Other, who gives him an alien army named the Chitauri, with the intent of invading Earth. He arrives through a portal accidentally created by Nick Fury, mind controls some S.H.I.E.L.D. guys, takes the Tesseract, and leaves. One of the guys Loki brainwashes is a guy called Hawkeye, whose superpower is being really good at archery and being nobody's favorite Avenger. In response to Loki being a bad dude, Nick Fury activates the Avengers Initiative and gets ready to assemble the team. Nick Fury recruits Captain America, who's been training after being defrosted. Black Widow goes to Bruce Banner, and another agent named Phil Coulson, who's been in other movies, I just didn't mention him, goes to Tony Stark, who's pretty apathetic about the whole thing. Eventually, Loki is captured by Iron Man and Captain America, and is being prepared to be transported to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s flying aircraft carrier, when Thor all of a sudden comes out of nowhere and fights the two heroes until they all realize that they're friends. Loki for some reason doesn't use this opportunity to escape, and instead waits for his S.H.I.E.L.D. goons and Hawkeye to break him out after the Avengers start fighting and Bruce hulks out. During all this fighting, Captain America and Iron Man fix one of the helicarrier's wings, Black Widow beats the brainwashing out of Hawkeye, Phil Coulson dies except not really, and Loki escapes to New York where he creates the portal for the Chitauri to invade Earth. So with the threat imminent, the Avengers decide to officially assemble and save the day. The battle for New York begins, and at one point the government shoots a nuke at New York City despite there being several citizens still on the island. Iron Man, however, grabs the nuke and flies the missile up through the portal, destroying the Chitauri home ship and Phantom menacing all of the aliens. So the Avengers have saved the day. Afterwards, they each form Thor and Loki go back to Asgard with the Tesseract in hand, and in the post-credits scene, the Other is talking to a big purple alien named Thanos, who will definitely be important as we go forward. Iron Man 3. Tony Stark has PTSD from nearly dying in that space portal, fights a guy called Aldrich Killian who says he's the Mandarin, but he isn't actually the Mandarin, and Tony gets the arc reactor and shrapnel removed from his chest, and makes a promise to Pepper that he'll stop being Iron Man, which he inevitably won't keep. That's about it for Iron Man 3. Thor: The Dark World. Thor has to stop some Dark Elves from doing this thing called the Convergence, and Jane Foster gets this thing called the Ether, which is actually the Reality Infinity Stone, stuck inside her and needs it to get removed. In the end, Thor saves the day, but his mom is killed, Loki fakes his death, and secretly takes over the throne of Asgard, and the Reality Stone is taken to this guy called the Collector out in deep space. And that is the worst movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Next, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Surprise, S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually being run by Hydra the entire time, so now it's up to Captain America, Black Widow, Nick Fury, and a new character called the Falcon to save the day and stop Hydra from killing a bunch of people with 3 helicarriers. During the movie, a Hydra agent named the Winter Soldier is revealed to be a still-alive Bucky Barnes, who has been brainwashed and forced to kill people for Hydra over the years. He also has a metal arm because he lost his actual one by falling off that train 70 years ago, but in the end he starts to remember a little bit more about himself and goes off to do his own thing. Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm sitting down now because I'm tired. So this movie is a space adventure that introduces us to the Guardians of the Galaxy. There's Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, who got abducted by this blue alien named Yonder after he watched his mom die of cancer in the 70s. Moreira, green alien space lady, who is actually the adopted daughter of Thanos alongside her sister Nebula. Drax, a not as green alien whose family is all dead. There's Rocket Raccoon, who's a loudmouth talking raccoon. And lastly, there's Groot, who's a tree alien that can only say the words I, am, and Groot, specifically in that order. They team up to stop a guy called Ronan, who wants to destroy everything with the use of the Power Infinity Stone. Spoiler alert, they do that. And in the end, they deliver the Power Infinity Stone to the Nova Corps, which is essentially just space police, officially becoming the Guardians of the Galaxy in the process. This is essentially the movie that explains what the Infinity Stones are and why that purple guy Thanos wants them all, and also Howard the Duck's in the post-credit scene, so I mean, what's not to love? While we're here, I might as well talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It's a sequel that came out 3 years after the first one, but chronologically takes place pretty much a couple months after it, so I might as well just lump it in here. There isn't much to say though. The Guardians fight Star-Lord's space dad, who's actually a billion-year-old god/living planet named Ego. Groot is now an infant because he died in the first one and now ages alongside the group. Gamora and Nebula make up after hating each other for most of their lives. Nebula goes off on her own to try to fight Thanos, which, spoiler alert, goes horribly. A bug-like alien with empathic abilities named Mantis joins the group, and Yonder dies sacrificing his life for Star-Lord's in one of the few hero deaths in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Avengers Age of Ultron. The Avengers, including Iron Man, who only took 3 movies to break his promise to Pepper, attack a Hydra base in a country called Sokovia so they can retrieve Loki's scepter from the first Avengers movie. Hydra had been using the scepter to experiment on people, with the only 2 survivors being the twins Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. For a quick rundown, Quicksilver can run really fast and Scarlet Witch has energy manipulation, telekinesis, and mind control powers. Anyway, so Tony and Bruce take the scepter and find out there's an AI inside of it called Ultron. Ultron connects to the internet and, presumably after being on Twitter for more than 5 seconds, surmises that the only way to save the Earth is to eliminate all of humanity. Ultron builds a robot body and attacks the Avengers after a house party and hammer lifting contest, one in which Cap was able to nudge the hammer slightly. But in the end, Ultron escapes and takes the scepter with him. He flees to the now abandoned Hydra base and proceeds to build a robot army for himself. But because he's a supervillain and wants to become even more powerful, he recruits Wanda and Pietro Maximoff to retrieve some vibranium for him. They go to a guy named Claw to get it, but Ultron cuts his hand off and steals the vibranium anyway. The Avengers try to stop them, but Scarlet Witch causes them all to see weird mind visions and causes the Hulk to rage out. Tony stops the Hulk with a specialty Iron Man armor called the Hulkbuster, but in the end a lot of people get hurt and the team is left in low spirits. The team then decide to go to Hawkeye's character development barn, where they learn of his secret family and decide to just hang out for a while. Thor, however, doesn't stay at the character development barn since he has no arc in this movie, and instead decides to go to the future movie setup Hot Spring, where he learns what the Infinity Stones are and how important they are. Nick Fury eventually shows up at Hawkeye's character development barn, so he can kick the team back into gear and get them pumped up to fight Ultron. In the meantime, Ultron had been working on a new body with red synthetic tissue and half vibranium armoring, and he decides to put the stone inside Loki's scepter into its forehead. Luckily for him, that stone just so happens to be an Infinity Stone, aka the Mind Stone. The Maximoffs, however, learn of Ultron's real plan, which will lift the country of Sokovia high into the sky, then drop it back down, effectively dinosauring all of humanity. So the twins decide to dip, and the Avengers also steal Ultron's new body. Since it worked so well the first time, Tony and Bruce decide to make another robot, this time plugging Jarvis's AI into Ultron's stolen body. After a brief fight and a little lightning from Thor, the Avengers create Vision, who can also hold Thor's hammer for some reason. Afterwards, the Avengers go to Sokovia so they can stop Ultron's global annihilation plan. They fight a bunch of robots, Quicksilver is gunned down trying to save Hawkeye, the Hulk takes the jet and flies it off into space, and the day is saved. Afterwards, Thor goes off into space to learn more about the Infinity Stones, and Captain America and Black Widow train a new team of Avengers including War Machine, Falcon, Scarlet Witch, and Vision. After the credits, Thanos is seen grabbing a super cool gauntlet called the Infinity Gauntlet, and he vows that he will now get the Infinity Stones himself, a vow that he then spends the next 3 years setting on. Ant-Man. This movie introduces Scoutling, aka Ant-Man, who can shrink really small, control ants, or grow and shrink other objects. He does this by using some special particles named Pym particles, created by Hank Pym, who also used to be the original Ant-Man back in the 70s. It also introduces the Quantum Realm and Pym's daughter Hope, who at the end gets her own suit and will later become a superhero named the Wasp. That's it. Captain America Civil War. I also don't have a Blu-ray for this one. One day on a mission, the Avengers are trying to catch a guy called Crossbones whose
main goal is to blow up,
causing the Scarlet Witch to throw his body into a building, killing a ton of civilians in the process. The UN decides to take this opportunity to create a set of guidelines called the Sokovia Accords, since this wasn't the first time the Avengers have indirectly killed people or caused property damage. As a result, the Avengers split into 2 sides, with some believing that they should be regulated, and the others believing that it's an invasion of civil liberty. The next day, the UN are having a meeting over the Accords, when all of a sudden a bomb goes off, triggered by someone who's impersonating Bucky Barnes. During a bombing, King T'Chaka of an African country named Wakanda is killed, causing his son T'Challa to become the country's new king and protector as a Black Panther. He's also seeking revenge against Bucky since he thinks he killed his dad. Cap eventually finds Bucky and proves his innocence, but Iron Man and the government don't believe him, so the two form actual teams so they can beat each other up at a German airport. Cap's team consists of Falcon, the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Ant-Man, while Tony's team consists of War Machine, Vision, Black Widow, and freaking Spider-Man, baby! Anyway, the two teams fight for a bit, and it's pretty great. Spider-Man and Captain America have a chat about how they're both from New York. Ant-Man grows to a giant size, becoming Giant Man in the process, allowing for Steve and Bucky to escape. And Vision accidentally shoots down War Machine, causing his spine to become paralyzed. So Cap and Bucky sneak away to figure out the real person who bombed the UN, while Tony and secretly Black Panther give chase. Also, after the fight, all of the Avengers that teamed up with Steve get arrested. Steve, Bucky, and Tony, realizing that Bucky is actually innocent, find the bomber, who is a man named Helmut Zemo. Zemo was a Sokovian who sought revenge against the Avengers for indirectly killing his family during the weekend of Ultron. Zemo, however, knows he's no physical match against the Avengers, so instead he plays a videotape of a brainwashed Bucky killing Tony Stark's parents, causing him to become furious and lash out against them. So Steve and Bucky face off against Tony. Despite Tony blasting Bucky's metal arm off during the fight, Steve ultimately comes out on top after he stabs his shield into the arc reactor of Tony's suit. As Steve and Bucky leave, Tony exclaims that he doesn't deserve this shield and that his father made it, causing Steve to just simply drop it. While that was going on, Black Panther caught Zemo and had him arrested, and afterwards SefChol allows Steve to use Wakanda's technology to fix Bucky's brainwashing. Also, Steve breaks out all the arrested Avengers that were on his team. Doctor Strange. This movie introduces Stephen Strange, who was a neurosurgeon and got his hands broken in a car accident, but learned magic to fix them and became a super cool sorcerer in the process. It also introduces Strange's buddy Wong, the Dark Dimension and multiverse in general, and also the Time Infinity Stone, which is placed inside a little medallion thingy called the Eye of Agamotto. Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man gets a movie that better show his dynamic off of Tony Stark, and at the end he gets an Iron Spider suit specifically made for him in case of emergencies. He also faces off against a villain called the Vulture, and Tony Stark and Pepper Potts get married at the end. Thor Ragnarok. Thor, after finding nothing about the Infinity Stones after 2 years, learns that Loki has taken the throne of Asgard from Odin, so the two go to find them. After some brief help from Doctor Strange, the two find their father, who warns them about their secret sister Hela, and then he pieces out to Valhalla or whatever. He dies is what I'm saying. Hela shows up, breaks Thor's hammer, and causes the two of them to land on a junker planet named Zakar. Thor gets found by a scavenger named Valkyrie, who forces him to participate in this guy called the Grandmasters Tournament, where he faces off against the Hulk, who landed here after the Ultron fiasco. After the fight, which Thor unfairly loses, he tries to escape and turns Bruce Banner back into the Hulk for the first time in 2 years. Valkyrie helps Thor and Bruce escape since she is secretly an Asgardian, and the three of them, alongside Loki for good measure, arrive on Asgard, which Hela has already subjugated. Thor fights Hela and gets his eye cut out, but he also gains super cool lightning powers through the magic of Led Zeppelin. Eventually they realize that Hela is too strong, so Thor tells Loki to start the prophesied destruction of Asgard called Ragnarok, causing Hela to maybe die and Asgard to blow up. Thor, Hulk, Valkyrie, and Loki all escape onto a ship alongside the remaining Asgardian refugees, with their course set to Earth. Black Panther. So T'Challa, after beating up the Avengers in Civil War, decides to go back to Wakanda so he can be crowned king officially, but eventually an American with Wakanda descent named Killmonger shows up and takes the throne for himself. After being presumed dead, however, T'Challa comes back, kills Killmonger, and takes the throne back for himself. This movie introduces the technologically advanced Wakanda and reveals that vibranium is all over it. It introduces Okoye, who's the leader of an all-female warrior tribe called the Dora Milaje, and Shuri, who's T'Challa's genius little sister, and it introduces other tribes and characters like M'Baku of the Jabari tribe. At the end, Wakanda opens its doors to allow aid for other countries, and in the post-credits scene it's revealed that Bucky has been free from all of his brainwashing and he's currently just chilling in a hut. Avengers Infinity War. We're now at the big ones, everybody. So Thanos decides that 3 years has been enough, and he decides to start gathering all the Infinity Stones. Thanos' plan is that once he gathers all the Infinity Stones and places them into his Infinity Gauntlet, he can simply snap his fingers and eliminate half of all life in the entire universe. Anyway, he annihilates the Nova Corps off-screen and grabs the Power Stone, and goes to Thor and the Asgardians to retrieve the Space Stone, aka the Tesseract. Thanos and his posse/adopted children, called the Black Order, kill half the ship and leave the other half remaining, despite Thor telling them that they don't have the Space Stone. Surprise, however, Loki managed to grab the Tesseract right before Asgard exploded, much to Thor's annoyance. Loki's about to give the stone to Thanos, but uses the opportunity to have the Hulk jump in and fight him. Hulk loses badly, though, and Thanos knocks him out. Hulk is then transported to Earth by an Asgardian named Heimdall, who was in the other movies, I just didn't mention him up until now, but dies because of it. Thanos then crushes the Tesseract, places the Space Stone within it into his Infinity Gauntlet, destroys Thor's ship, and bails. Also, Thanos breaks Loki's neck after he tried to stab him with a pinky little knife like an idiot. As Hulk plummets into orbit, he crashes into Doctor Strange's crib and warns him of the ensuing threat as Bruce Banner. Doctor Strange decides to relay this information to Tony Stark, who is out on a date with Pepper Potts at the time. As Doctor Strange is explaining the situation, two of the Black Order members arrive and demand the Time Stone from Strange. Strange naturally refuses and a fight breaks out. During the fight, Bruce Banner tries to turn into the Hulk but finds that he can't, and Spider-Man sees the damage from afar and decides to help out. Eventually, Strange gets captured and abducted, with Iron Man and Spider-Man, now rocking his Iron Spider armor, going to give chase. While this is going on, the other two Black Order members arrive in Scotland and rip the Mind Stone out of Vision's head, who just so happened to be on a date with Scarlet Witch at the time. The two Avengers nearly lose until Captain America, Black Widow, and the Falcon arrive, forcing the aliens to retreat. Since Civil War, these three have been on the run from the government, which is why Captain America has a beard, Black Widow has blonde hair, and the Falcon looks the same. The Avengers go back to Avengers HQ, where Rhodey and Bruce are waiting for them. Once there, Vision decides that the only way to stop Thanos is to have the Scarlet Witch blow up the Mind Stone in his head, which would kill Vision in the process, so the team doesn't like that. Because of this, Captain America decides to take the Avengers to Wakanda so they can find a way to remove the Mind Stone without killing Vision. Meanwhile in space, the Guardians of the Galaxy find the wreckage of the Asgardian ship, and they also find Thor, who's somehow still alive. Thor tells the Guardians about Thanos, the stones, and how he's going to stop them. They decide that Thor, Rocket, and a now teenage crew are going to go to a planet called Naval so they can construct a weapon powerful enough to kill Thanos, while the remaining Guardians go to a place called Nowhere so they can retrieve the Reality Stone from the Collector. Unfortunately for the Guardians though, Thanos already beat them to the punch and retrieved the Reality Stone, and he also grabs Gamora and takes her through a portal. On Thanos' ship, Thanos forces Gamora to reveal the location of the Soul Stone, which she only knows, or else Nebula will be tortured. Gamora eventually agrees and the two go to a planet called Vormir where they find Red Skull of all people, who's just been chilling on this planet for like 80 years. The Nazi explains to them that to retrieve the Soul Stone you must first sacrifice something that you love, so Thanos reluctantly eats Gamora off a cliff. Meanwhile, Iron Man and Spider-Man save Doctor Strange by ejecting the Black Order member into space, and they soon crash land on Thanos' homeworld Titan, with the Guardians arriving soon after. The Avengers and Guardians form a plan to defeat Thanos, while Doctor Strange uses the Time Stone to look into the future and see all the potential outcomes they face. Strange then tells the team that out of 14,605 potential realities, there is only one in which they truly win. So, no pressure there, guys. While all this is going on, Cap and the Earth Avengers meet up with Black Panther and Bucky in Wakanda, and the team quickly gets to work to find a way to remove the Mind Stone from Vision. Unfortunately though, Thanos' armada and all the remaining Black Order members arrive in Wakanda, so it's up to Wakanda's entire army and the Avengers to defeat them. While this epic battle is going on, Thor, Rocket, and Groot get to work on that super powerful weapon he needs to kill Thanos, with the help of a large Peter Dinklage, who also built the Infinity Gauntlet, but don't worry about that. Just as the Avengers are starting to get overwhelmed on Earth, Thor, Rocket, and Groot arrive with Thor's new axe, Stormbreaker. Back on Titan, Thanos arrives and begins to fight the Avengers and Guardians, with Nebula arriving shortly after. Eventually our heroes get the upper hand and incapacitate Thanos, and as they're starting to remove the Infinity Gauntlet, Star-Lord learns the unfortunate truth that in order for Thanos to get the Soul Stone, he had to kill Gamora in the process. So he takes that pretty well and starts beating on Thanos, causing him to snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity! Giving him the upper hand. Doctor Strange and Iron Man try to hold him off on their own, but are ultimately no match, and Tony even gets stabbed in the process. Before Thanos can put him out of his misery, Doctor Strange offers the Time Stone in exchange for Iron Man's life, to which Thanos agrees. With 5 stones in hand, he then leaves to go get the final Infinity Stone. Back on Earth, the Scarlet Witch is forced into the fight, leaving Vision wide open to be ambushed. Eventually, all the other Black Order members are killed, and the day is saved, until Thanos arrives and starts plowing through the Avengers like they're nothing. Realizing there's no time left, the Scarlet Witch is forced to destroy the Mind Stone while it's still in Vision's head, killing him and destroying the stone in the process. Thanos, however, doesn't seem to mind, as he simply reverses time, plucks the stone out of Vision's head, and kills him again. With all the Infinity Stones in hand, Thanos prepares to snap his fingers, but is stopped by Thor, who lunges Stormbreaker into his chest. Thanos, however, remarks that Thor should have aimed for his head, and he snaps his fingers anyway. Afterwards, Thanos leaves and the Avengers are forced to watch as half the universe turns to dust around them, including some of their friends like Bucky Barnes, Groot, Scarlet Witch, the Falcon, and Black Panther. It's a similar story on Titan, as all the Guardians there, including Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, turn to dust as well, leaving only Iron Man and Nebula. As the movie ends, we see Thanos walking out to his sunrise as he smiles, truly believing that what he did was for the good of the universe. Afterwards, we see how the rest of the world's reacting to the snap, as Nick Fury frantically grabs and activates a pager. He shortly turns to dust as well, but as the pager falls, we see the logo for a hero yet to be introduced. Now let's see what Ant-Man was doing during all of this, because that's what we want to watch after seeing all of our favorite characters die. Yeah, I'll be honest, this is kind of a filler movie. All that really happens in it is that it shows us that Ant-Man's been on house arrest in Civil War, but he's brought out of it by Hope Van Dyne and Hank Pym so they can rescue Janet Van Dyne from the Quantum Realm. They fight a girl named Ghost, but she's boring, so who cares? And that's about it, minus one important scene. After the credits, Hope, Hank, and Janet send Ant-Man to the quantum realm through a thing called a quantum tunnel that's in the back of a van. While he was down there though, Thanos' snap took place, causing Ant-Man's team above to disappear, trapping him in the quantum realm in the process. And that's really it. Pretty boring movie, not gonna lie. Speaking of pretty boring, we have Captain Marvel. This is an origin movie set in the 90s starring Carol Danvers, who was a fighter jet pilot that one day received special powers through a jet engine that was powered by the Tesseract. Shortly after, she gets abducted by an alien race called the Kree, who's also at war with another alien race of shapeshifters called the Skrulls. The Kree wiped Carol's memory so that she would believe that she was one of them, but in the end she learns the truth and wipes the floor with the aliens. After that, Carol gives Nick Fury, who she befriended in this movie, that pager we saw in Infinity War, and she goes off into space to help the Skrulls find a new homeworld, which is why we haven't seen her up till now. What you really need to take away from this movie is that Captain Marvel is super duper strong and friends with Nick Fury. You also need to know that Skrulls can shapeshift, and that Nick Fury wears an eye patch because an alien cat scratched his eye out. And now for the final one, Avengers End Game. Let's do this thing. 3 weeks after Thanos snapped his fingers, Iron Man and Nebula are riding the Guardian ship back to Earth, but they're slowly running out of supplies and come to the conclusion that they're probably gonna die in space. Thankfully, however, Captain Marvel finds them, and she drags the ship back to the Avengers compound. Afterwards, the remaining Avengers, with exception of Tony, figure out the planet that Thanos has gone to, and plan to go there with the hopes of bringing everyone back with the stones. However, once they arrive there, Thanos reveals that he used the stones to destroy the stones, so that he could prevent future meddling or potential temptation. So in response, Thor beheads Thanos and the team leaves defeated. 5 years pass and everyone's still sad about half the universe being gone. Meanwhile, Ant-Man manages to escape the quantum realm due to a rat of all things reactivating the quantum tunnel he entered. Ant-Man soon meets up with Black Widow and Steve Rogers and explains to them that while 5 years passed in the real world, only 5 hours passed for him in the quantum realm, leading him to believe that the realm can be used to travel back in time to undo the snap. The three go to Tony Stark to ask if he'll help with their time travel plot, to which he declines, seeing as he now has a happy life with his wife Pepper Potts and their daughter Morgan. However, after seeing a photograph of him and Peter Parker, he changes his mind and helps build a time machine with Rocket and Bruce Banner, who in the 5 years has merged with the Hulk to become Smart Hulk, or as I like to call him, Shulk. So the Avengers work on reassembling a team to travel back in time, retrieve the Infinity Stones, and hopefully undo the snap. Tony gives Cap his old shield back. Hulk and Rocket go to the home of the Asgardian refugees, where they find Thor, who's become fat and depressed after his failure to stop Thanos. Black Widow goes to Tokyo to find Hawkeye, who's become a vigilante named Ronin after his entire family disappeared in the snap. And also War Machine and Nebula tag along too. The only Avenger not present is Captain Marvel, who's out doing space stuff, but we'll get back to her. Anyway, with the plan figured out, the Avengers split into a team and go back in time to retrieve the Infinity Stones. Iron Man, Captain America, Ant-Man, and the Hulk go back to 2012 during the events of the first Avengers, so they can retrieve the Space Stone, Mind Stone, and Time Stone. Banner meets Doctor Strange's original master, the Ancient One, and convinces her to give him the stone with the promise that the Avengers will return the stones once they're done with them. Captain America is able to retrieve the Mind Stone and Loki's scepter after a brief battle with his 2012 counterpart, but Ant-Man and Iron Man fail to grab the Space Stone after it lands near 2012 Loki, who grabs it and disappears with it. Out of desperation, Tony and Cap decide to time travel further to 1970 to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s HQ. Once there, Tony grabs the Space Stone and reconnects with his father, while Steve grabs more Pym particles and sees Peggy Carter, his love from World War II. Meanwhile, Thor and Rocket travel to Asgard in 2013 during the events of Thor the Dark Thor, in order to retrieve the Reality Stone currently inside Jane Foster. So Rocket goes and does that while Thor receives a pep talk from his mom, who is fated to die that day. Before they leave though, Thor calls his hammer Mjolnir to him, proving that despite everything, he is still worthy. The last team, consisting of Black Widow, Hawkeye, War Machine, and Nebula, travel back to 2014 so they can retrieve the Power Stone and the Soul Stone. War Machine and Nebula manage to grab the Power Stone after knocking 2014 Star-Lord out, but as they travel back to the present, Nebula starts freaking out due to her robotic parts trying to link up with her 2014 self. From this, and by seeing 2023 Nebula's memories, 2014 Thanos is able to deduce that he succeeded in killing half the universe, and that the Avengers have traveled back in time in order to undo his plan. To prevent this, he captures 2023 Nebula and has 2014 Nebula disguised as her and travel to the future instead. Meanwhile, Black Widow and Hawkeye arrive on Vormir to retrieve the Soul Stone, where they're informed of the stone's requirement of sacrificing something that you love to get it first. The two friends then briefly fight over who will sacrifice themselves to get the stones, but it's ultimately Black Widow who jumps off the cliff and dies so that Hawkeye can retrieve the Soul Stone. The Avengers reuniting in the present, they briefly mourn over Black Widow's death before getting to work on a new Infinity Gauntlet made out of Stark nanotech. The team ultimately decides that Banner should be the one to wield the Infinity Gauntlet and bring everyone back, to which he does, causing him immense pain and maybe the use of one of his arms. However, the team is unable to celebrate as 2014 Nebula brings Thanos and his army to the future, who decimates the Avengers HQ in the process. Everyone survives, however, and Tony, Steve, and Thor decide to use the opportunity to face off against Thanos while he still doesn't have the stones. Thanos reveals to the three of them that since the other half of the universe was ungrateful for his initial plan, that his new plan will be to completely erase the universe and recreate it in his own image. While this is going on, 2014 Gamora defects from Thanos' side, and she, alongside 2023 Nebula, try to convince 2014 Nebula to do the same. 2014 Nebula refuses though, so 2023 Nebula is forced to kill her past self. Meanwhile, the big three and Thanos are duking it out, with Thanos ultimately getting the upper hand. At one point, Thanos overpowers Thor, but is saved by Mjolnir crashing into Thanos' chest. It then flies to Captain America's hand, proving that he is worthy of wielding the hammer. Despite everything though, Thanos still comes out on top and smashes half a Cap's shield and pushes them to the ground. Thanos then unleashes his entire armada, vowing that he will destroy the Earth first before resetting the entire universe. Captain America, bruised and beaten though, stands up, tightens his shield, and prepares to face the army alone. As he walks towards the alien army, he hears the voice of Sam Wilson in his earpiece and witnesses in awe as portals created by Doctor Strange appear, revealing all of the fallen Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, basically everybody in the Marvel Universe, ready to face off against Thanos' army. Everyone gathers, and after Captain America says the words Avengers Assemble, the two armies clash over the fate of the universe. During the battle, the Avengers realize the only way to defeat Thanos is to return the Infinity Stones to the proper timeline, specifically through the Quantum Tunnel and Ant-Man's Man because the actual time machine got destroyed. At one point, Thanos commands his ship to fire upon the opposing army, but the ship is quickly destroyed by Captain Marvel returning from space. Carol grabs the Infinity Gauntlet and nearly flies it through the Quantum Tunnel, but is stopped by Thanos, who destroys the tunnel by throwing a sword at it. Thanos tussles with Captain America, Captain Marvel, and Thor over the gauntlet, but ultimately he overpowers all of them. With things looking dire, Tony jumps in and tries to grab the gauntlet from Thanos, but he's quickly knocked away. With the gauntlet in hand, Thanos proclaims that he is inevitable and snaps his fingers. Fortunately for him though, nothing happens, and as Thanos looks at his now empty gauntlet, he realizes that Tony Stark has removed all of the stones from it and placed them into indents in his armor. With the power of the Infinity Stones flowing through him, Tony Stark proclaims that he is Iron Man, as he snaps his fingers and reduces Thanos and his army to dust. However, using the stones costs Tony his life, and he peacefully passes away as the people most important to him comfort him as he goes on. The funeral is held for the hero with everyone showing up, including the kid from Iron Man 3 for some reason. Afterwards, Thor appoints Valkyrie as the new king of Asgard and goes off with the Guardians to find 2014 Gamora, who disappeared after the battle. Captain America is tasked with returning the stones and Mjolnir to the proper timelines, but decides to stay in the past with Peggy Carter after he's done. In the present, an elderly Steve Rogers gives Falcon his shield, appointing him as the new Captain America, and the movie draws to a close with Steve and Peggy getting that dance that they promised all those years ago. And that's it. That's the story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Except for Spider-Man Far From Home, and WandaVision, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Shang-Chi, and all the other Marvel projects that are currently in development. Okay, look, I know I left plenty of things out, but since I don't want to be here for all eternity, I decided to just focus on what I think the core story is, and what I think is the most important going forward. Marvel's presence in creating a long-lasting and ever-changing universe is incredibly impressive, especially with each individual story being at the very least decent. The fact that these movies have been going on for as long as they have is incredibly impressive. And with Avengers End Game becoming the highest grossing movie of all time until it wasn't, it's pretty clear to see that Marvel has a bright future ahead of them. But when is the new Howard the Duck movie? Oh, we need it. He's in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. It's so good. Look at this one. This movie's incredible. It's not a part of the MCU, but it's so good. It's directed by George Lucas. There's a man in a prosthetic suit. I think you can see his mouth inside the beak sometimes. Oh man, it's so good.